What about from a philosophical point of view? Who's impacted you the most?
Jimmy Carr.
Jimmy Carr.
He was the most intimidating person I've ever met.
Yeah, you had that respect. You had that. I want to talk to you about that as well, because obviously, you know, I've seen the episode, so much gold in it, deeply impactful episode. It really is a great piece of art. How the hell did that come about?
I paid him £250,000.
You take a loan out.
No, I didn't. I didn't have any connections in the industry. My dad didn't know him. I didn't chat to his agent. I literally just asked him.
How did you do that?
I sent him an email. I guessed his email address.
Guessed it?
I won't say what it is, but I guessed it. I sent one email that day, and he responded the next morning saying, "Excellent, I love the effort that was put into this email. When are you next in London?" And I said, "Jimmy, I'll be in London when you need me in London." He said, "Well, I've got 24 hours in March. I would love to include your podcast in my press run for the new Netflix special."
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in London, he also recorded with Stephen Bartlett on the Diary of the CEO and the boys at the Trigonometry podcast, a huge podcast, on the same day, the same 24 hours, and then came to see me.
You're in with the big boys. You are. So how did you go about actually, because I'm assuming you just didn't write, "Can you come on my podcast?" How did you frame the email?
This is horrible, but I was a bit manipulative in terms of human psychology. I signaled to him in the subject line a previous guest of mine, Rory Sutherland, and I know that they've met before, and I know that Jimmy must consume his books or work. Rory Sutherland spoke about him on one of my recent podcasts. I've done 3 episodes with him. So I put in the tagline, "Rory Sutherland spoke about you. How about we speak about him?"
Mm-hmm.
So that must have been the trigger that made him open the email, first of all. And then I literally wrote, first thing was, "Hi Jimmy, I want you on my podcast. I know what you're thinking. What a selfish, self-centered cunt. But if you give me 15 seconds and read on, I'll prove to you why that isn't the case." And then the first point was I shared my story. Much like you, I'm a budding working class comedian in a day job. I haven't quit it. Here's all the things that I've learned from your story. I would love to share that lesson forward. The second point was giving myself all the credentials. I've had X amount of views over the last few months. I've been in the Business Insider. I've met the Queen. These are the guests I've had on. I'm Scotland's 20th most entrepreneurial Scot under the age of 35. All that bells and whistles stuff to prove that I am who I say I am. And then the third one was, I can make this super easy for you.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end I said, "Jimmy, here's my darkest joke. If you laugh, you must come on the podcast." I'm not going to share it on the podcast. It's way too dark.
Okay.
And he must have liked that joke.
Yeah.
So that was the technique.
Yeah, that's unbelievable, man.
I'm not special, by the way. I just want people to know that they are closer than they think to things that they've always dreamed of.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carr was my idol. I remember vividly, my mum had passed away. I was sitting in my shitty council estate with my little sister, trying to find happiness in the most grave time of my life. And we put on 8 out of 10 Cats, and we laughed alongside Jimmy. And a couple of years later, I brought my sister down from Scotland to meet Jimmy Carr and enjoy that moment together with her. And that was from one email. I was in a cafe in Glasgow with 15 seconds of courage to guess his email address and send it.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened. People can do that too.
Yeah.
I'm not special.
But I think there's a lot in how you managed to do that. Like the way you framed up that email, you know. I really need to explore this Rory Sutherland character because I've seen him popping up on a few occasions now, and I'm keen to talk to you about some of the things he speaks about. But there's a lot into that. Guessing the email, writing the email. Yeah, it's a cool story, man. It's a cool story.
I've never prepared so much for a podcast. I listened to every stand-up show, every podcast that he'd been on. I read his book about 3 times.
Did you?
The night before the podcast, I locked myself in a hotel room for maybe 24 hours, and my sister was there with her friend. I had a videographer. I brought him down. They went off and did their own thing, and I was basically just leaving me alone for 24 hours. I've never prepared so much.
Did you feel really nervous before it?
Mm-hmm.
Did it feel like the biggest performance of your life?
Yeah. I think people see the end result, right? So they see...
You didn't come across that way.
No. Well, it's a performance, right? It was make or break. I had to go into character.
Yeah.
I was
you
really
were cool as
nervous.
a cucumber, man. You were just... chilling.
Yeah, I was just sharing stories. But that's what people don't see. The reason I could be so cool was because the difference between nervousness and excitement is a level of preparation. And I threw the kitchen sink at preparation for that.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't see the fact that I had to welcome Jimmy Carr to this comedy club where the podcast studio was in the basement of, shake his hand, tell him I'm a fan, tell him what was going to go on that day. People don't see that part either. And I was super nervous there.
Mm-hmm.
And when we finished the podcast, he said, "Oh, so what are you up to for the rest of the day?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to take my sister for a pint and spoons to celebrate." And I was like, "What about you, mate?" He goes, "Oh, I'm flying to Las Vegas tonight to start my US tour. And I'm having dinner with Adele, but I think she might cancel on me, so I'm going to reach out to Barry Manilow." And I'm like, lives are very different.
I can imagine him saying that. That is good, man. And I heard them cracking a joke about your sister in the university
So
of the
funny.
podcast. So that's like, she was sitting in the background, wasn't she?
Yeah.
When you were recording.
It's actually hilarious. I'll tell you a quick story. I think your listeners may like this. So when we rocked up to this comedy club, there's a coffee shop in the front entrance of it. And he said to the barista, "Oh, you'll be out of a job in the morning." And the barista went, "What?" He goes, "This place is going to go up for sale. It's not doing too well." And he goes, "Can you show me around?" So he shows him around this comedy club, which is used as a co-working space during the day. Mm-hmm. And he opens this curtain where everyone was working and the stage was there. Just have a look. And everyone turned to Jimmy and went, and I went, "I'm sorry, Jimmy, that happens everywhere I go."
Brilliant.
And then 2 seconds later, my sister's like, "Okay, is there anything I can do for you, Jimmy? Can I get you coffee from the coffee shop?" And he's like, "Oh, take an Americano." So me and Jimmy head downstairs and he's cracking jokes about how small this little studio is. He's making jokes that it looks like Joseph Fritzl's basement. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
He slaggins me for being Scottish. And then I just see my sister coming down these stairs shaking this cup.
Yeah.
By the time it gets to Jimmy, there's nothing left in it because she's so nervous.
Oh, really?
And everyone in the room, the producer of the podcast, my videographer, everyone's just so nervous because there's an evident superstar in the room.
Yeah. And it sounds like he is just like that, you know, like in terms of how he's going about his business, cracking jokes and very normal. What you see on the TV is what you actually get.
He's a great guy.